Daniel Carter had spent 11 years making the impossible look ordinary. Every morning at 6:10, he dropped his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, at school before driving across the city to Harrington Global, one of the largest companies in the country. His job title was simple: Senior Operations Strategist. His actual job was much more complicated. When factories stopped producing, Daniel found out why. When shipments disappeared, he traced them. When million-dollar contracts started losing money, he found the leak. When executives argued over spreadsheets, Daniel looked at the machines, the workers, the warehouses, and the customers. He understood the business from the ground up. That was why the company's $100 million industrial division had survived 3 major crises. And that was also why nobody understood why Daniel still drove a 12-year-old sedan. He could have afforded something better. Much better. But after his wife died, Daniel stopped caring about appearances. His priority was Emma, her school, her meals, her homework, her bedtime stories. Everything else came second. At work, Daniel rarely talked about his personal life. He arrived early. He did his job. He went home. He didn't attend expensive executive dinners. He didn't flatter senior managers. He didn't play office politics. And that made him invisible to people who measured importance by titles. Especially Victoria Harrington, the company's newly appointed CEO. Victoria was brilliant, ambitious, and determined to modernize the company. She had inherited the CEO position after her father stepped down. She was only 36. Within 6 months, she had reorganized half the company. She wanted younger leadership, more aggressive targets, faster decisions, and above all, loyalty. Daniel respected her intelligence, but he didn't always agree with her. One Monday morning, Victoria called an executive meeting. The conference room was filled with department heads. Daniel sat near the end of the table with a folder in front of him. Victoria walked in. Behind her was a young man wearing an expensive suit. "This is Ethan Harrington," she announced. "My nephew." Everyone stood. Daniel remained seated until everyone else did. Victoria smiled. "Ethan will be joining the company as my strategic operations liaison." Several executives applauded. Daniel looked at Ethan. The young man couldn't have been more than 26. He had a prestigious degree, a polished resume, and absolutely no experience running a manufacturing division. Victoria turned toward Daniel. "Daniel, I want you to report directly to Ethan." The room became quiet. Daniel thought he had misheard. "I'm sorry. Ethan will oversee the division's operational strategy." Daniel looked at the CEO. "He's taking over the division? He's learning the business. Then why am I reporting to him?" Victoria's expression hardened. "Because I said so." Nobody moved. Daniel glanced at Ethan. The young man looked uncomfortable. Victoria continued. "I want you to provide him with weekly reports. Every decision, every contract, every supplier negotiation, every operational issue." Daniel took a slow breath. "For transparency? For accountability?" Daniel nodded. "I've been accountable for this division for 11 years. And now you're accountable to Ethan." There was a pause. Daniel looked around the room. Nobody met his eyes. Then Victoria said the sentence that changed everything. "Report to my nephew." Daniel closed his folder. "Understood." Victoria smiled. She thought she had won. She didn't know Daniel was about to leave. That evening, Daniel sat in his apartment with Emma. She was doing homework at the kitchen table. "Dad." "Yes." "Are you sad?" Daniel looked up. "Why?" "You've been quiet." He smiled. "I'm just thinking." "About work?" "Yes." Emma put down her pencil. "Did somebody hurt your feelings?" Daniel laughed softly. "Something like that." She nodded seriously. "Then you should quit." Daniel stared at her. "Why?" "Because when my teacher is mean, you always tell me I don't have to stay somewhere that doesn't respect me." Daniel smiled. "That's good advice." Emma returned to her homework. Daniel looked at the wall. He had spent years building that division. But he had also spent years watching executives take credit for work they didn't understand. This was different. Victoria wasn't simply changing his title. She was placing an inexperienced relative over a division worth $100 million. And Daniel knew exactly what would happen. The following morning, he submitted his resignation. Victoria stared at the letter. "You can't be serious." "I am." "You've worked here for 11 years." "Yes." "And you're leaving because I asked you to report to Ethan?" Daniel nodded. "That's not the reason." "Then what is?" "You asked me to accept responsibility without authority." Victoria leaned back. "You've always been difficult." "Maybe." "Ethan is family." Daniel nodded. I understand. Then you should support him. I supported this company for 11 years. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake. Daniel stood. I hope I'm wrong. He placed his access card on the desk. And I hope you succeed. Victoria looked at the resignation letter again. Where will you go? Home. That's not what I mean. I know. He walked out. Nobody stopped him. For the first 3 days, everything appeared normal. Ethan took Daniel's office. He scheduled meetings. He announced new efficiency targets. He replaced several suppliers. He told managers that Daniel's methods were outdated. The executives applauded. Victoria was pleased. This is what modernization looks like, she told the board. Then the first shipment was late. Then another. A factory reported a shortage of critical components. Ethan blamed the supplier. The supplier blamed the new contract. The new contract blamed the logistics department. Within 2 weeks, costs began climbing. Victoria demanded answers. Ethan promised everything was under control. But Daniel knew the truth. The division wasn't broken because of one bad decision. It was breaking because hundreds of small decisions were connected. Daniel had spent 11 years understanding those connections. Ethan didn't. 3 weeks after Daniel resigned, the division missed its quarterly target by millions. Then a major client threatened to leave. Then another. The board called an emergency meeting. Victoria walked into the conference room confident. She left 2 hours later looking shaken. The $100 million division was collapsing, and the person who could have stopped it was no longer inside the building. That night, Victoria stared at Daniel's resignation letter. For the first time, she noticed the final sentence. I hope you succeed. She picked up her phone. Her finger hovered over Daniel's number. Then she called. Daniel answered after 3 rings. Hello. Victoria took a breath. Daniel. Yes. We need to talk. Daniel looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in the next room. What happened? Victoria didn't answer immediately. Then she said the words she never thought she would say. We need your help. Daniel closed his eyes. He had expected the call. He just hadn't expected it so soon. For the first time since becoming CEO, she didn't walk into the building feeling in control. The board had given her 72 hours. 72 hours to stop the division from losing another major client. 72 hours to explain why a profitable $100 million operation was suddenly bleeding money. And there was one problem she couldn't escape. Everyone kept asking the same question. Where is Daniel? Victoria had no answer. She found Ethan in the operations room surrounded by spreadsheets. We have a problem. Ethan looked up. I know. How serious? He hesitated. The Houston client is suspending shipments. Victoria's face tightened. Why? They're concerned about delivery reliability. Fix it. I've already called logistics. And they're working on it. Victoria stared at him. That's not an answer. Ethan looked frustrated. Daniel made this look easier than it was. Victoria said nothing. Because that was exactly the problem. Daniel had made complexity invisible. She called him again. Daniel, please come back. There was a pause. I can't. We'll give you your old position. No. More money. No. Whatever authority you need. Daniel's voice remained calm. Victoria, you don't understand. Then explain it to me. You didn't ask me to leave because I was incompetent. You asked me to report to someone who didn't understand the operation. I couldn't accept responsibility for decisions I couldn't control. Victoria closed her eyes. You're right. Daniel was silent. She continued. I made a mistake. It was difficult for her to say, but she said it anyway. I made a serious mistake. Daniel didn't celebrate. He simply asked, what do you want from me? Help us stabilize the division. Who is responsible now? You would be. Fully. Then I'll help. Victoria exhaled. But I have one condition. What? Ethan stays out of operational decisions. Victoria hesitated, then agreed. Done. Daniel returned the next morning. The moment he walked into the operations center, employees stood up. Some looked relieved. Others looked embarrassed. Daniel didn't mention the past. He simply asked, where are the shipment schedules? Someone handed him a folder. He studied it for less than 5 minutes. Then he looked up. Who changed the supplier routing? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I did. Why? It saved money. Daniel nodded. On paper. He pointed to the spreadsheet. But the new supplier is 1,200 miles farther from the assembly plant. Ethan frowned. The shipping cost was lower. Per shipment. Daniel turned the page. But the delivery time doubled. And because our inventory system was designed around the old schedule, The factory is now running out of components. Victoria stared at the numbers. So one change caused all of this. One change exposed several others. Daniel immediately began rebuilding the schedule. He called suppliers. He renegotiated transportation routes. He redirected inventory. He contacted the angry clients personally. Within 24 hours, the first delayed shipment was moving. Within 48 hours, the Houston client agreed to resume orders. Within 72 hours, the board received a new recovery plan. The division stabilized. The board chairman looked at Victoria. "Why did you let him leave?" Victoria looked across the table at Daniel. "I thought I was putting the right person in charge." Daniel said nothing. The chairman nodded. "Then make sure you don't make the same mistake twice." After the meeting, Victoria approached Daniel. "I owe you an apology." Daniel looked at her. "Yes. I treated your experience like an obstacle. You treated it like something replaceable." She nodded. "I did." Daniel picked up his jacket. "Then don't do it again." Victoria smiled slightly. "I won't." She extended her hand. Daniel shook it. But before he left, Victoria stopped him. "Daniel." "Yes. I want you to become Chief Operating Officer." He stared at her. "That's a big promotion. You've earned it." Daniel thought about Emma, his old apartment, his quiet life. Then he smiled. "I'll consider it." Victoria laughed. "That's the first time anyone has ever made me wait for an answer." Daniel walked toward the elevator. "Get used to it." Months later, the $100 million division became the company's strongest division again. Ethan stayed with the company, but started at the bottom. He spent months working in warehouses, learning logistics, meeting factory workers, and understanding the business. Daniel insisted on it. "You don't learn operations from a conference room. You learn it where the work happens." Ethan eventually became a good manager. Not because he was Victoria's nephew, because he finally earned the respect of the people around him. And Victoria changed too. She stopped asking who deserved a title. She started asking who understood the work. One afternoon, she visited Daniel's office. On his desk was a photograph of Emma. "How is she?" "Great." "She's still telling you what to do?" Daniel laughed. "Constantly." Victoria smiled. "She sounds like a good boss." "She is." Victoria looked around. "You know, when I told you to report to my nephew, I thought you were going to argue." "I wanted to." "Why didn't you?" Daniel looked at the photograph. "Because I had already learned something." "What?" "Sometimes the strongest response isn't an argument. It's knowing when to walk away." Victoria nodded. Daniel picked up his coffee. "And sometimes, if the company is lucky, the people who walk away are willing to come back." Victoria smiled. "Are we lucky?" Daniel looked at her. "Very." That evening, Daniel drove home. Emma was waiting at the door. "Dad." She ran toward him. He hugged her. "How was your day?" "Good." "Did your boss behave?" Daniel laughed. "She's learning." Emma smiled. "Good." They sat together at the kitchen table. Daniel realized something. The CEO had ordered him to report to her nephew. She thought she was demonstrating authority. Instead, she had pushed away the person who understood her most valuable division. And when the division began collapsing, she learned a lesson no business school could teach. Titles don't create expertise. Family connections don't create leadership. And a company worth $100 million can depend on one quiet person sitting in the background, doing work nobody notices until he leaves. Daniel never wanted revenge. He didn't need it. His resignation had already made the point. He simply wanted respect for the work he had spent 11 years doing. And when the CEO finally understood that, she didn't just save a division. She became a better leader. As Daniel tucked Emma into bed that night, she asked, "Dad." "Yes." "Did you save the company?" Daniel smiled. "No." "Then who did?" He kissed her forehead. "Everyone did." And that was the truth. Because a great company isn't saved by one executive. It's saved when people finally learn to listen to the person who has been quietly holding everything together. Colin.